So it is my pleasure to introduce Miss Amber Hollingsworth. Amber comes to us from North Carolina, and I am just thrilled to have her. I was turned on to her, I don't know, maybe a year ago, and her podcasts and her YouTube, which is Put the Shovel Down. And I just took a chance, and I emailed. I saw in one of the, I think, videos there was an email address. I took a chance and I emailed and I said, hey, would you want to come and present? And it just so happened that she replied to my email. So I about dropped to the floor when I got a reply from her. And after I got up off the floor, I called my husband and I said, guess who just emailed me? And so those of you who know Amber, the kind personality and genuineness you see on YouTube is exactly how she is. So that's one of the things that I love about you, is that you are, you're full on good. So Amber will tell you more about her background and how this really fits into pharmacy. Is that, this is what the pharmacy technicians are front facing. We are talking with the patients, and we're talking with patients where what I have learned, in everybody's tree there is some type of addiction that they are acquainted with. And unfortunately, some of us are more familiar with it than others, but there is something on that tree. And so I know that when you're front facing with your patients, you're seeing that. And so I prepare to be enlightened today, and prepare to be enlightened with Amber. And so, like I said, I'll have Amber tell you more about her background, but please help me welcome Amber.
I need a chair. Can I just take one?
Of
I'm not
course.
gonna
Let me
sit,
get
I
it for
just
you.
need it.
And then you advance your own slides here.
Okay.
Where would you like to sit?
Perfect. I'm just gonna put it right here. A lot of people tell me things like, I don't want to take a medication because that's cheating. And I hear that from people who are struggling with an addiction, and I also hear that from family members. Is it okay if someone takes Wellbutrin, or are they just going to get addicted to Wellbutrin? Well, what I would say is, no one ever got arrested for breaking into someone's house and stealing Wellbutrin, I promise you. It's one of those medicines that you kind of have to remind people that they need to take, so they're not going to get addicted to it. Now, there are medicines that are addictive, but those antidepressants really just aren't one of them. I've never known anybody to crave their antidepressant or obsess about it or anything like that. When people say to me, I don't want to take medications because it's cheating, I say that's ridiculous. Other people will say sometimes like, maybe people just want to take medications because they don't want to deal with the underlying issue with addiction. And I also say that's ridiculous. For me, beating an addiction is about strategy. It's about being smart. It's about understanding what addiction is and getting 5 steps ahead of it. And if you know that taking a medication is going to help you get ahead of it, and we'll talk about some of those medications and the different ways that comes into play, then in my mind, you're making sure you're doing every single thing possible to get ahead of it. There are some medicines, and we'll talk later about them, that you take because they won't let you use the drug anymore. Now, that's not cheating in my mind. That's saying, I am so determined to beat this thing, I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen anymore. To me, it's the opposite of cheating. So it's just one of those thoughts that a lot of people have that they have to get past regarding medications. Now, I don't think medicines are the issue or the cure, I guess, for addiction necessarily, but it can be a very helpful part of people's journey. And one of the things I want you guys to get from today is that the effectiveness of the medicines, now you guys listen to the doctors when they tell you about the medicines, okay? But in my experience as a counselor, the effectiveness of the medicines have mostly to do with when the person takes them. Not like what time of day, but like what stage of change are they in? Do they want the medication to be helpful and effective? Are they trying to make a change? Now, if you give a medication to someone who's trying to make a change and they want that medicine to be helpful, guess what? It's helpful. If you give a medication to somebody who's just taking it because their family says you're crazy, we want you to go see the doctor, the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist, they're just taking it because to get their wife or their mom or somebody off their back or something like that, this is probably not going to be very effective. So, and that's not just because of placebo effect, it's because they're doing the other things that they need to do in addition to taking the medicine. So let's take a look at some of those stages so you understand what I mean when I say it depends on what stage they're in. Now, I have to figure out if I can hold this microphone through all this stuff. We're going to see. I took my tall shoes off so I wouldn't have to manage that. All right, this is called the blanket top. I brought this blanket. It's a baby blanket. As you can see, it's like nice and soft. And when you look at it, it probably makes you smile. It makes me smile when I look at little baby blankets. And when you look at this, I'm going to put it up here on this chair. When you look at it, I want you to think about, this is what the person underneath the addiction is. The person underneath the addiction is somebody's child, it's somebody's husband, and they're not a wife or sister or brother or parent. And they're not bad people. Now, addiction will make people do bad things. Addiction will turn you into a bad person, and that's why you get such a bad reputation for being addicted. But I promise you, they weren't always that way. They didn't become addicted because they were a bad person. They probably did some bad things because they became addicted. And that's what I want you to understand. When you look at this blanket, I want you to think about who the person really is. If you have someone in your life, or yourself, you've struggled yourself, or you know someone who has, this is that real person. And this black sheet is going to represent the addiction. And we're going to talk about how it sort of systematically and progressively takes over who that person is. A lot of people talk about addiction being a disease, and there are some very significant brain changes that happen when you have an addiction, but I think the addiction happens before the brain change happens. That's my personal opinion. Someone has usually long been addicted by the time they get the brain changes that make them what you might call chemically dependent. Most of us think about addiction as like chemical dependency, like I need to drink in the morning or else I'm going to shake or be sick. Trust me, that person was addicted for years before they needed to drink in the morning. And if we could realize that, then we could start intervening with people sooner, I think, because we wait until they're all the way, I call it end-stage addiction, to try to intervene. Family members don't always do that. They can see it before that, but a lot of times the addicted person does, and a lot of times even clinicians won't even recognize it until it's what I call end-stage, which is silly, because you don't wait till any other illness is end-stage before you treat it, right? It doesn't make any sense. So when a person first becomes addicted, and I think anyone can become addicted, but people mostly become addicted when they're kind of in a down spot in their life, usually. Sometimes that down spot is just being a teenager. That's a down spot, I think, in and of itself, right? It's tough being a teenager. So that's why they're more prone to developing an addiction. But other down spots might be maybe you lost a loved one, or you lost a job, or you always wanted to be a professional football player, but then you got hurt and you hurt your knee, and now you can't go do that. That's a grieving process called loss of dream. You're going through something difficult. It can even be a breakup. And because you're going through something difficult, you don't feel good, right? And nothing seems to make you feel good. Being with people doesn't seem to make you feel good. Doing the things you used to like to do doesn't seem to make you feel good. And so if at that point you start to interact with a substance or some other kind of addictive behavior, it makes you feel better. And that's different. What's different for that person is they need it quickly, as opposed to someone who already feels good. It's like a bonus, right? So it's a difference in, hey, I need this to feel okay, versus I need this because it's extra fun. And that's sort of the difference you see in people who maybe drink to be social, or occasionally to have fun, or maybe they've been drinking a ton in college because they're having lots of fun. And then somebody who's maybe drinking or using some other substance because they need it because they don't feel good. What happens is the very first and most important symptom of addiction, for some people, start from day one, from the very first time. Now, that's not the case for everybody who becomes addicted, but it is the case for a lot of people. Other times, people may drink or smoke marijuana or use drugs recreationally for their whole life, and then something bad happens, and then they start using the substance problematically. And it's because now all of a sudden I'm using this substance to self-medicate. That's when you get into trouble, when you're using a substance to self-medicate. That very first symptom that happens is called preoccupation. And so at this point, when someone uses, the first and most important symptom of addiction is they start thinking about it all the time. They like it. They want more of it. Sometimes when you hear people tell their stories about being addicted, you'll hear them say things like, it was like my missing piece. I was in love with it. And they start immediately, almost immediately thinking about, how can I get that again? How can I do that again? That was awesome. And so this thing that you can't really see on the outside starts to happen on the inside, and they start planning and scheming and thinking about and wondering when they can have that again or something like that. It depends on how old they are and their resources, how quickly they can regain access to that. Sometimes it's years between the first time and the next time. In most cases, it's a matter of days because they like it and they want it again. So you get this preoccupation, which you really couldn't quite notice from the outside. That preoccupation makes that person seek out that substance more or think about that substance more. It doesn't necessarily make them use that substance more. And that's why you can look at two people who maybe drink alcohol, both of them drink a lot, same amount, one of them's alcoholic and one of them's not. And the difference is the one that is obsessing about it and thinking about it and planning their life around it and unhappy when they don't have it, that's the alcoholic. So when you look at the criteria for addiction, there's nothing in there about what or how much or how often. Nothing. Has nothing to do with that. I have clients that I see who are alcoholic who literally drink once a month. But for the rest of the month, it's all they think about, right? It feels like everything else they're doing is just crap they gotta do till that weekend comes when their spouse is away on a work trip and it's gonna be on, right? It's the preoccupation that makes addiction, not the substance. And that starts from the beginning. Once that happens, I think intuitively the person knows on some level it's kind of weird. And the other people probably aren't thinking about it as much as they're thinking about it. And so what begins to happen, the second symptom is they begin to hide. And when I say hide, I mean actually a couple of kinds of hiding. So we're kind of like getting a little bit more in here, taking this person over. You still can't see it at this point, but this hiding that I'm talking about can mean, like in the way you're probably thinking, like hiding the substances, which addicts and alcoholics definitely do. They have it hidden all over the place. But more what I'm talking about is they sort of hide this preoccupation they have. They're hiding how much that they are thinking about it. And so what begins to happen is they develop this whole internal world that's happening, and everything else, or most everything else, becomes like pretending this mask. And so they just keep doing and saying all the things that they normally say and do, so you can't quite tell it at this point, but they're hiding this process that's going on inside. And then sometimes, like I said, they're hiding the actual substance or the actual addictive behavior, because it doesn't have to be a substance. And when that happens, it gets to the point where they can't enjoy activities that they used to enjoy before. You know, maybe they've been a baseball player their whole life. Maybe they've always enjoyed mountain biking. Maybe they've, been very, very focused on their career and they're excited about that. What happens is this preoccupation takes over. They're hiding it, they're pretending it's not there, but it is there. And then it's like their regular self begins to fade away. When you see this in teenagers or young people, it's like their whole life they've always wanted to be, like, I don't know, a football player, an ice skater, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden they just want to quit the team. And you're like, what? This is all you've ever cared about. And they'll tell you some kind of lame excuse, which you will believe, because it will seem plausible enough. They'll say, well, it's not like my coach, he's a jerk. Well, coaches probably started being a jerk because you've started underperforming and you're probably skipping practices and you're not showing up. So the coach is getting onto your case, but you don't really tell that part when you tell the part about why you don't want to be on the team anymore. But what really is happening is interfering with the time you could be doing other stuff. Not only that, but as your brain chemicals start to change, you lose the capacity to experience joy and happiness from anything else. So if you are still doing activities, you're just doing it to go through the motions. You're not really enjoying them anymore. So once those activities stop, then you start to be kind of noticeable. And other people can start saying things to you like, what's wrong with you? You're not quite yourself anymore. You know, you used to be like this, but now you're not like that. Or, you know, why have you changed all your friends all of a sudden? Or why are you always like out late and you never want to come home? So people start to like get on your case about it. Particularly the people that live with you. They're the ones that are going to notice first. If we're talking about somebody who's married, it's almost always the spouse that is the only one that can see it at first. And no one else can see it, because from the outside, the person's still pretending really good, so they're going to work, they're doing stuff. Everybody thinks this person's fine and great, but the spouse sees that the person is different, and the person is not the same anymore. They get sort of the short end of the stick, as spouses usually do, you know. So the spouse starts to get on you as one of the very first consequences, which is sort of the next stage that happens here. So now the consequences start to happen. And this person now appears less and less and less like themselves anymore. The family being frustrated and upset with you is just the first consequence. Then there are other consequences, because you definitely can't bring your A game in life when you're 24/7 thinking about a substance or an addictive behavior, planning it, scheming it, using it, recovering from it, getting more of it, hiding it. That takes a lot of work, especially you're alcoholic. It's a lot of work to hide all those empty bottles. It becomes like a 24/7 job. The amount of thinking that goes into it is hard to even comprehend. And it's so much so, at this point, things in your life start to like fall through the cracks. Your money starts to get off balance. Your work starts to get off balance. Your grades go to crap. Your family's upset with you. As these consequences pour in on you, now we're going to get to the big daddy symptom. It's this symptom that's going to set the whole thing on fire. And that symptom is shame. Because now you know at this point something different about you. That you're doing something, behaving in a way that's not quite congruent with who you are on the inside. Because you're sneaking and you're hiding and you're lying and maybe you're stealing and maybe your grades are suffering and you haven't told your family, but you're hiding all this stuff, which makes you begin to feel bad about yourself. On a deep level, you start to really not like yourself anymore. And shame, of all the human emotions, is the most uncomfortable one of them all. If you think about embarrassment as kind of like a low-level form of shame, I can think about some moments in my life that I can just remember feeling embarrassed, and it makes me feel squirmy inside. Everybody thinks, for just think about something you've done you feel embarrassed about. You don't have to say it, just think it. You start immediately wanting to do anything to make that thought go away, don't you? Because it's not comfortable. And so when this shame starts to happen, now I really, really, really need this substance. And I start to wrap myself in this substance almost completely. Every now and then, I might peek my head out, like the real person sort of peeks their head out. They're sober for 5 or 10 minutes or something. And they look around. Guess what they're going to see? A big mess. Everything is crappy. Everyone is mad at them. They can't stop using it at this point or they're going to be sick. And so guess what happens when they peek their head out and they see that mess? They just want to run back in there. No thanks. I have this nice, convenient anesthesia that helps me not to have to feel or deal with any of that stuff, any of that uncomfortable feeling. And then everybody's on your case. Everybody's saying, I'm not going to pay for your lawyer this time. They're saying all these things to you, and then you're being defensive towards them. And you get so distracted by that defensiveness and being mad at the people who are mad at you. You ever done something wrong, and you knew you did something wrong, but someone's mad at you, and then you immediately felt defensive? Right? Because it's just like a natural reaction. So everybody's on your case, maybe your boss is on your case, your teacher's on your case, whatever. And you naturally, outwardly, you become obsessed with defending yourself, explaining why people are wrong about you and why they don't understand and why they just think they know things about you. And this becomes very problematic in my mind because it distracts you from really seeing what's going on. You get so busy fighting all these external things that are coming at you that you don't stop long enough to really look at what is going on inside and to acknowledge, hey, I'm not myself anymore. Being defensive actually is another thing to help self-medicate that shame. Because it's way easier for me to be mad at you than to be looking at what I'm doing. Because anger feels better and more powerful than shame. So we're going to talk about the family and how they come into this picture in just a second, but you're in this cycle of using and shame and consequences and preoccupation and hiding. And this is like a 24/7 job at this point, right? And then you start to, every now and then these consequences happen and you'll start to do what I call bargaining with it. Something bad will happen, you'll have a bad day, you'll just wake up feeling like crap, and you'll start to make promises to yourself. You'll start to say, okay, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to back it down. I'm going to use less. I'm going to stop doing this, something like that. You start to bargain with it, but it doesn't work because life is still such a mess. And usually your bargains don't work at this point too, because now you have this brain thing that they talk about, what they call the brain disease, which is like, I need the substance, the dependency is there. And what most people do when they bargain is they try to do it less, whatever it is, they want to do it less. Because they're like, I don't want to give it up completely. If I just do it less, I won't have all this unmanageability and craziness in my life, which is probably true. But doing it less doesn't work. And there's a lot of brain science behind that. We won't go into that today, but there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't work scientifically. At this point, this person is like functioning in the world, some better than others, but they're not in the same world as everyone else. They're in this sort of, sometimes it's like a blackout phase, if it's like alcohol or a benzo or something, but I'm going to call it like a brownout phase. Like they're just barely aware of the things that are out here because this mental life has taken up so much of their time and energy that everything else is just crap that they're trying to do to keep the consequences away or the people off their back. You know, and the real world is happening in here. It's like, I call it, it's like being on this treadmill. Like if you're addicted to opioids, I say you're on a 4-hour treadmill. Every 4 hours, you gotta figure out how to get that stuff, and it is expensive, or you're gonna be really sick, like you have to. And you get tied to this treadmill that you're on. And so you're not paying attention. Everyone I see, the families are always saying things like, I think they got a memory problem. They say the same things all the time. They don't remember what they said. Well, if they're alcoholic, they really don't remember, for real. But it's usually not a memory problem, it's the fact that I'm so preoccupied, right? You could be sitting here listening to the lecture today, but if something else is going on in your life and you're preoccupied with something in your head, you're probably not going to remember anything about it, right? Because you're in here. So the person is sort of walking around this sort of like brown out, hazy phase because they're just concentrating on something else. And that goes on to the point that this person becomes sort of delusional. If you've ever talked to someone who got an addiction, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever had an addiction, you know what I'm talking about. The thinking is totally off skew. And the reason it is because they're so busy with this preoccupation, they're hiding from the shame, they're being defensive, and they're either in withdrawal or they're intoxicated. And in either which state that they're in, it alters the perception of reality. So the way they perceive things that are going on is not the same way you are going to perceive things going on. And when you talk to people who have addictions and they're talking to you about how they see things, you literally want to be like, this is what I think in my head. Really? Really, you can't see that? You know? And you have this urge, and this urge that you just want to take them by the shoulders and say, wake up! What is wrong with you? That is not what's happening here. You have that urge, and trust me, if it worked, I would say do it, but it doesn't work. You want to shake them by the shoulders and just get a hold of them because their view of everything is just ridiculous, basically. Not delusional like, I see snakes there, although that can happen depending on the substance. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about like the way they see their life. For example, I see a lot of businessmen alcoholics. It's like one of my favorite things to see. And I've never seen one that didn't come in and tell me that what the problem was. They don't come in and tell me that they have an alcohol problem. They universally come in and tell me they have a wife problem. Universally. It's a teenager, it's a parent problem. And they really deeply believe this. It's not that just that they're just telling it to me to get me off their back. Like, that's what they feel like. I'm only hiding it because she's a crazy lunatic. She's so uptight. I don't know what her problem was. She used to be cool when I met her. Now she's so uncool. She's like her mother. You know, I think she's only like that because her daddy was an alcoholic and now she's just hypersensitive to it. She just don't get it. This is the story I hear over and over and over again. And it's sort of delusional, right? Because they're just not seeing that maybe their wife is kind of crazy, but they're doing a lot of like lying and hiding and sneaking and being dishonest and avoiding them. And that'll make a spouse crazy. It'll make any spouse crazy because they can't get through to you and they start doing crazy things to try to get through to you and to connect to you and to get you to see the problem. And then you just become really preoccupied with the fact that they are the problem. Now, you've got this delusional person here functioning, sometimes functioning more than others. A lot of that depends on the age the person is when the addiction starts. A lot of times when someone's an adult when the addiction starts, they will function for years before they become what you might think of as like a non-functional addict or alcoholic. If it's a young person, they usually become non-functional a lot faster. And that's because they never develop adulting functional skills to begin with. So they're even more non-functional. I'm going to grab my ball after this. Sorry. Judy, I know you're worried I'm not going to get these slides, but I'm going to, I promise.
You're doing beautiful.
I just did those slides because you said I had to make some slides. I'm going to talk about them now. All right, that's better. Now, here's a really interesting part about this whole thing, is if this mess isn't bad enough. We're about to like complicate it times 1,000,000, and I'm going to need another chair to show you. I'll take this one right here. I got it. So this chair is going to be the family member. It's usually the spouse or the parent, but it's somebody close. It can be your sister. It can be anybody, but it's this closest family member. And they're watching this person ruin their life, destroy everything, turn into a crazy person, and they're literally, it's like watching the person you love the most run in front of a train, and you know that they're just destroying themselves. And you get desperate. Family member right here gets desperate, and then they become not well. And so I want to tell you what that not well looks like. The first thing that happens to family member is they get preoccupied with it. They start to obsess about it. What are they doing? Are they drinking again? Are they smoking? Did they show up for work? Did they go to that meeting they said they were going to go to? Did they really pay that bill? Is that why my $20 went missing? They get preoccupied and obsessed with this family member. And so now at this point, this disease starts to move over here and get on this family member a little bit. They get obsessed about it. And then guess what they do? They start hiding the fact that they're obsessed about it. They're secretly spying, investigating, looking through the bank statements, looking at the phone messages, putting a tracker on your car. They turn into like, I call them like CSI agents. The moms literally should get a badge because they could definitely outdo any other CSI agent because they get so obsessed about it. I like to say, I know you walk around with a black light in your purse. So you get obsessed and you're hiding it. You're trying to pretend like you're not, because this person will say, what's wrong with you? You just don't even trust me. I might as well just go use because you're not going to trust me anyways. That's a good gaslighting technique. And this person says, no, I'm not. So just like this person is hiding how much they're thinking about, how much they're using, this person is also hiding how much they're thinking about it and how much they're spying on you. And guess what they do next? They stop doing all their fun activities. You think this person's going to yoga class anymore? No. You think they're keeping up with their quilting group? No. Because they don't got time for that. Because if they leave the house, you're going to do something sketchy. So they need to be there to watch after you, because they are watching you like a hawk, even if they pretend like they're not. And that hug that they give you, that's really a smell check, not really a hug. So, they're not doing their activities anymore. They're not like themselves anymore. They don't care about things that they used to do, that they used to care about. In fact, they have now lost the capacity because they're sort of depressed and anxious. A lot of times families get this illness. It's not really like in the DSM or anything, but I think it's somewhere between post-traumatic stress and obsessive compulsive. It's post-traumatic stress, and I'm compulsively checking to make myself feel better about all of that stress that I got going on. It's kind of like a coping mechanism. So they've stopped their activities, and then consequences start to happen for them. Those consequences can look like, now this person is mad at this person. This person is gaslighting this person. This person is purposely triggering this person to act like a lunatic, because here's what this person is doing. If we had more chairs, I put them over here, because this person is now, as a coping skill, they're like going around and they're telling the other chairs, the other family members, what a lunatic this person is. And they're doing that for a couple of reasons. They're doing that so that when this person tries to tell these other people to get them on the team against this person to say this problem, they're not going to believe them, and it's really effective. Because at this point, this person is kind of a lunatic, and even the outside family members can see it. Wow, she is kind of controlling. Wow, she is kind of critical. She is sort of upset. This even happens with counseling. Yesterday, one of my family counselors, I was in the airport, and one of my family counselors called. She said, Amber, I've got like 3 cases of this right now, and I don't know what to do. And she said, I'm talking to these wives, which she talks to a lot of wives, and they're all in separate, not with us, but somewhere else. They're in couples counseling, which you'd think would be a good thing. But the addicted person is saying, yeah, I'll go to couples counseling, but you're not going to bring up my drinking or my cocaine use or my porn addiction or whatever it is. You're not allowed to bring that up. So now they're going to couples counseling, and they're not even bringing up like this big giant main thing. And what happens is the counselor starts to think, why is this person so critical? Why is this person never happy with them? And so then the counselor sort of over-aligns with the addicted person because they're not getting all the information. And so not only does the couples counseling not work, but it's making it worse. So the counselor can be one of these other chairs sitting out here. If they don't really know what's going on, they can only work with the information they have. And then this person will do things to make this person be crazy. So that then it proves to all these other people that this person is crazy, because it's one of the ways that they're protecting that illness. That's one of the consequences. And then so now this person has everyone else thinking bad of them. Everyone else is mad at them. Their work is suffering. Their friends are mad at them because they don't come out and be fun anymore. So they have all these consequences too. And as you can see, it's sort of taking them over. And guess what? They feel shameful and guilty about it. They feel like, why is this happening? They don't want to talk about it to other people because either the other people won't believe them, or they know the other people think that they're the bad guy. So they're hiding it, they're preoccupied with it, and it's consuming them the same way as it consumes this other person. And they do a lot of bargaining too. Well, maybe if I just get you to see a psychiatrist who gets you on that Wellbutrin, you won't be depressed anymore and you'll quit drinking. It's not going to work that way. Maybe if I get you to go to the couples counselor, maybe if I could just get you back enrolled in college, that would just help your self-esteem. Maybe if you got back on the football team, you'd feel better about yourself, and then this problem would go away. Because one of the things that the family often thinks is, I know that there's some other things going on with this person other than addiction. Because trust me, if they weren't depressed and anxious before, they are now. And the family can see that to some degree. And so they'll start trying to get this person to deal with what I call like the underlying problems, thinking that if they deal with underlying problems, the addiction will go away. Once addiction is in there, it is its own problem. And it won't go away just because you address, like, even if it's like trauma, like childhood trauma. Some people think if we address the childhood trauma, then they won't need the substance anymore. And it doesn't work like that, because at this point it's changed the brain chemistry, it's changed the thinking. I mean, it's just a whole different situation. So they do a lot of bargaining. They beg, they plead, they threaten, they give ultimatums, they do all the things that you would do too, and I would do too, because you're desperate and you're scared, and this is the person you love most in the world, and you're literally watching them destroy their life and yours, by the way, and you're mad about it. And so now you're both like under here. This disease has taken you both over, and you're both walking around in a brownout. I had this mom who told me one time, she said she had literally worked at the same place for like her whole career, like 20 years, and she said, I drive home the same way every single day, and yesterday I was driving home, and I got pulled over by a cop car, and that cop said, you know you ran that red light, ma'am? And she said, no, I didn't. And he's like, yes, you did. And that was a good example of how preoccupied she is, how she's sort of in that brownout. You know, you forget that Aunt Marcy said you're supposed to bring the chocolate cake to the family event. You just forget because you're obsessed with this whole thing. And the family can become delusional too, like really delusional. Family delusion surprises me way worse than addict delusion, because I kind of expect the addict to come that way. But families, they can get really delusional. I once had this I used to run this like teenager addiction outpatient program. And one of the moms of one of the kids that was in that program came to me and said, hey, I have a friend whose son is also struggling. I didn't say this to that mom, but I secretly knew who that person was, because the kid had been telling me about that other kid, and I knew that this kid, the other kid, was way in it. You know, they were like the one using the drugs, dealing drugs, like that was like the hookup. The friend was like the main kingpin of this little teenage circle or whatever. And she said, I told that other mom about you might get a call from her. Her name is Susie or something. So a few days later, I did get a call from Susie, and she said, hey, my friend told me to call you. I'm not really sure why, but you know, something's going on with my kid. I don't know what. Now remember, I secretly have the information, but I can't say that, obviously, because I would be breaking somebody's confidence to do that. And she told me everything that was going on. And I said, you know, based on what you told me, I think it probably is addiction. In fact, I think it's a really big addiction. I don't even think you should bring them to see me. I think you should skip me and go to like a higher level. She's like, okay, but I could tell she didn't believe me. I didn't think anything about us about it. It was just a phone call. Then like 2 weeks later, the initial mom, she comes to me and she says, did you hear what Susie did? I was like, no, what she did? She took her son to some place, probably out in California, and paid because she decided he had a vitamin deficiency, like $100,000, to get him all kind of tested for some vitamin deficiency. And I was like, oh my gosh. It is frustrating when you see the families like this, because you're just like, how can you not see this? But you got to remember, they're wrapped up in this too, and it's very difficult to see it when you're that close to it, not to mention that this is your kid, or this is your wife, or this is your brother, and you just don't want to think that about them. So the family is delusional. Now, most people think that the only way that this system will get better is that this person right here suddenly decides they don't want to be like that anymore. They hit bottom, they decide they want it for themselves, they don't want to drink anymore, they don't want to smoke anymore, they don't want to do whatever, and then they're just going to like decide to come out of here, and then it's going to happen all one day, and they're going to go to treatment, and they're going to get better, and then this person's going to get better, and we're all going to live happily ever after. It's not really the way it works. Even if this person over here decides that they are going to get help and change, it's usually a lot of back and forth process, like years of back and forth process, and treatment episodes, and bargaining phases, and counselors, and all of this other stuff before they really get better. And that's if that's the way it works. But it's not usually the way it works. This person thinks when this person gets better, we'll be better. But I say there's an opposite way to go about it. At this point in the story that I'm telling you, this person like basically has nothing left. They're just like a shell of a human being. because addiction is like a parasite, and it's already taken everything from this person. There's just like, it's like they're possessed, and there's just like a alien in there operating this body that's there, basically. But this person still has some resources left, some love, some money, some shelter, some whatever. And so this parasite's now living off of this person, too. And part of living off that is make them feel crazy, make them feel guilty, make them act like a lunatic, make them say bad things that they didn't regret, and then they let you come back in the house and give you more money because they feel guilty about it. It's just around and around we go. So this person just keeps waiting for this person to get better. But there's another thing that can happen. This person can decide to get better. This person can decide that they're not going to live this way anymore, and they can come out from underneath that illness. And that doesn't necessarily mean they don't love this person anymore. I'm not saying they have to kick this person out or anything, but they just decide, I'm not going to let this suck me dry anymore. I'm done with this. And they get better. And when that happens, especially if they won't be real mean about it and they'll be real nice about it, then this person can't focus on this person as being the bad guy anymore. And they can't blame this person all the time. And so when that happens, they have to look at themselves and they can kind of see, I think this is a mess. Maybe this is my fault. She's not really that bad as I said she was. It's kind of nice. Now I kind of feel guilty. And at that point, this person then decides to start trying to come out of this thing. This second scenario is a lot more reasonable. Because guess who of these two people wants something to change? This one. This one's the one on YouTube that found my videos. This one's the one looking at treatment centers and calling counselors. You think this one's looking at videos? No. They don't want to think about that because they're not no alcoholic, they're not no drug addict. And even if they know they are, they definitely don't want to hear about it. It's this person that's looking for help. So what I try to do is I help this person to get better, and then I help this person to help this person. And when that happens, and we all come out of this thing, that's when addiction really stays away. When the whole system heals. That's what they call it. They say sometimes it's a family disease. That's why. It's because it really is a family disease. Now, in those stages, see, I want to do these slides. I told you, Judy. I promise. What did you say? I hit the arrows? Yes. You know, when you're looking at this whole system out here, you think, dang, technology, science has come so long. We've got treatment centers everywhere. We've got all these dang medicines. We've got all these things that are, disposal that we could use. So why isn't it getting any better? We got all these options that are good options, but it doesn't seem like our addiction numbers are getting any less, right? I think one of the main reasons for that is because the treatment system in general doesn't very effectively address the motivation issue. When this person who's addicted, and by the way, addiction pretty much, if it is a disease, it's a disease of the motivation center of the brain. They're not motivated by the things that would normally motivate you or I anymore. And so all the regular stuff that you think will make this person stop doesn't make this person stop. And that's what's so crazy making for the family. So this person isn't motivated to get better because the addiction blocks that part of the brain. And because it's nice and warm and toasty in the anesthesia world, it's a big hot mess out there that I will have to fight a legal battle, right? And deal with withdrawal and try to get my kids to forgive me and try to tell my wife I'm sorry. I mean, that's a lot of work. And so it's very, very difficult to get this person motivated to make any kind of changes. And addiction treatment centers, typically, I'm sure they're not all this way, but they're like, we're here to help you when you want help. You come back when you're ready. And there's a lot of reasons why that happens. And some of it is because addiction counselors get burned out. The average length of the time of an addiction counselor is 5 years. It takes more than 5 years to become an addiction counselor. And so, but you're just I can't take it anymore. I'm trying to help these people. They don't listen to me. They don't care about what I'm saying. They go out and they do what they want to do. Why am I doing this? And so you get to this sort of compassion fatigue point that you're just hey, when you want to get better, I'll tell you what to do. But the problem is that the biggest part of helping someone with addiction is getting them to see that there's a problem, because they don't believe they have a problem sometimes, are getting them over the fact that they think life will be terrible without the addiction, because that's their experience right now. If they're not intoxicated, then they freaking feel terrible. So they think that's what sobriety's like, but that's not what sobriety's like, that's what withdrawal's like. So you have to help them understand that. And they have a very hard time sticking to the solutions, because there's this whole willpower thing, which is a whole other talk for another day. But the key here is all the treatments out there, they all work. All the medicines, they all work. They're all fabulous. It looks like it doesn't work because most of the time the person isn't ready or able to follow through with the solutions. That's why it doesn't work. People are like, what's a good treatment center? They're all a good treatment center, you know? And I do think it's helpful to find sometimes some treatment centers have horses, and maybe your loved one loves horses, so go to that one. You know, there are some you can kind of find that fits people's personalities. But as far as like the programs, any of them will work. It's about getting a person ready to let the program work. But we just keep waiting for them to figure it out. But they're under that blanket over there. They're not going to figure it out most of the time. Like 95% of the time, they're not going to figure it out on their own. They're going to need some help to do that. And it just doesn't fit with what we know about how addiction impacts the brain. It actually changes the part of the brain that allows you to weigh consequences, to think through pros and cons, and you get in this survival mode where you're just literally surviving the next hour, and you can't get past that. You're on that treadmill, and you cannot step off the treadmill long enough to figure out what to do. So us waiting for them to figure it out and then go to treatment, and then they hit the bottom and they want it for themselves, and then they're just going to do everything they get told to do, and they're going to go to 90 meetings in 90 days, and they're going to tell their sponsor everything, and they're going to make amends to me immediately. It's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. I mean, it has happened. But even when that happens, there's a lot that happens before that. Bunch of years of back and forth, painful things, treatments that you paid $30,000 for that didn't work, stuff like that. So it just doesn't work with what we know about addiction science. Now we're gonna wrap it up here in just a second, but I want you to see this video. Raise your hand if you've seen this video before. It's not my video. It's just my favorite video about addiction of all times. So we're gonna take a look at it because I think it just does a beautiful job of illustrating the situation. If I hit play, is it gonna play?
I hope so.
Okay. So if you could write the rest of what happens after that last scene there, and I put it on your handout. You can put it in there if you want, especially if you're kind of artist. What do you think would happen next? Because it just ended right there, right? Leaving us like, what's going to happen? What do you guys think would happen next? If you thought about that and you could draw it on the paper, you probably could draw that. Even I could draw that. You can't draw anything. You think he's going to suck up that little gold nugget? You think he's going to step over the nugget? You think he's going to say, somebody come help me, I need to go to treatment? You know, what do you think is going to happen next? And if you could put in there the family piece, which is the next slide on there. Let's see if we can get to that. If you could put in there, because this didn't have any family in there, right? It just had the person. If you could put the family layered into that whole thing, it would really be some action happening, right? They'd be like standing in front of them and arguing and saying, don't do it. It kind of looks like this. Like that. The person gets crazy trying to make it stop. And then the person, right, gets all jazzed up about getting that person to get off their back. I don't have an alcohol problem, I have a weight problem. All right, let's see here. These are the official stages of change when you look at like addiction, science, medicine. People don't get better all at once. They think about it, they trial and error it, they bargain with it, they take action, they do good for a while, they think one won't hurt, they fall back in it, and we're gonna go through that several times before we really get it on a deep level that, no dude, if I suck up that little gold nugget, it is going to end badly every time eventually. Once they figure that out, then guess what happens? Then they start doing everything they learned in the treatment centers and the counselors, and then it works. So when they say, treatment didn't work for me, I'll listen, I'll say why, and I'll say, well, did you do what they told you to do? Well, I did most of it, but I didn't do this one thing. I didn't give up my girlfriend who's also shooting heroin. Well, that might be the problem. But it takes a while to come to terms with not only that you have a problem, but what you have to do to fix it is massively bigger than you could ever even imagine. It's not just quit drinking. It's literally change everything about yourself and your family. So it takes a while to get that to happen. It really does. And part of the reason why it doesn't happen in a lot of cases is because addiction infects, I use this word on purpose, it infects the one thing that could heal it. Because the one thing that can help pull someone out of addiction is connection. Connection is the opposite of addiction. When people feel connected and loved and cared about, and they feel like their life has meaning and purpose, they just don't need that addictive thing any longer. But addiction runs off any ability to connect that's there. It infects it. In my mind, it's like the AIDS virus. The reason why the AIDS virus is so terrible is because it impacts the white blood cells, and the white blood cells are the things that are there to fix infections, right? And it wipes out the thing that's there to help fix infections. That's what addiction does. It wipes out the thing that's there that could heal them. And so there is an addiction cure, and that's connection. Now, there's 100,000 ways to get it. You can get it by going to 12-step groups. You can get it by going to church. You can get it in a million ways. You have to become a person that you like. And in order to do that, you have to have some connection, some meaning and purpose in your life. Those are really the keys to recovery. They're simple, but they're not easy. And then I think it's important to remember, because sometimes people will say things like, well, what does it matter? You know, they're not helping society. They're just a drain on society. About a year and a half or 2 years ago, I was at this training like this, only for counselors. And it was like a break, and I was standing by the elevator or something. And this other counselor who counselors are way nicer than me, most of them. I'm pretty like direct and sassy and horsey, which is my own word. Most counselors are like so sweet. They're almost so sweet, I'm just like, oh my God. I just turn around. So I was standing by one in the elevator, sort of tolerating them. And this person says something about not Naltrexone, but Narcan, which is the medicine that can bring you out of an overdose because it blocks the effects of opioids. So I don't even know why they do that. They just go back out there and use. They probably should just let the person die. I was literally like dumbfounded. And I feel sort of ashamed of myself for not even saying anything, that I couldn't even process that she said that. It took me like 10 minutes. I was already back in the training, processing that, getting madder and madder as I sat there. Because I guess on one hand, I can kind of see where it came from, but it's not this one addict. There's 10 people attached to that addict. There's a community attached to those people. So every time that we just say, well, forget you, and we're just throwing you to the side out there, you're not just saying, well, sometimes you just lose one. That will have negative, I probably could ask the people in this room, most of you have been impacted either by addiction yourself or by someone that you care about's addiction. Like, big time affected. Negatively and positively, maybe. So it's not a matter of just saying, well, we lost one. It's everybody. If you want to learn more about addiction, learn more about the family process, you can find me on YouTube, on my channel, Put the Shovel Down. That's all I got for you. Questions, concerns?
One question.
Yeah, sure.
So, your thoughts is, I work in mental health for pharmacy, and that. So ours is, we have a bunch of people that struggle with the idea of calling addiction the same as abuse, and it's not. I mean, they're two separate pieces, but yeah, they kind of go hand in hand, but.
Like substance abuse and substance addiction? I think it is all the same. I think it's, substance abuse is just a couple of steps back in this storyline, but it's addiction long before it's dependence. Once you've got that preoccupation going on, which is the thing that causes substance abuse, you're already in the process of addiction. Addiction goes on for years before you're chemically dependent. And a lot of times we think, well, a person's addicted if they're not down here. Well, I think that's silly, because they have been for a long time. Yeah. Now that person can come out of it faster. It's a lot easier for this person to dig out who's just an abuser, right, than the person's dependent. There's a lot of truth in that. Like, that person could, stop and get better if they wanted to, but they don't want to because they don't see what the problem is because they haven't lost everything yet. That's a good question. Any other questions, thoughts? We'll do Judy and then we'll come
I
over here.
think on one of your YouTubes, you tell me what number is right. You said that it takes an average of 12 different attempts to get sober or actually in full recovery. Was it 12
Yeah.
attempts?
I think the number is like 8, but basically it takes a bunch of them. And you meet people sometimes, they had an addiction, they went to treatment, and they got better, and you think, oh, they did it one time. No, I promise you, they tried 3,000 things before they went to treatment. It's just that they'd already tried all those things and then went to treatment. Other people go to treatment, and they're not done trying all the other things. So they get out of treatment, they try all the other things, they go back to treatment, and that's why it seems like, treatment doesn't work or, something like that. But it takes a bunch of times for everybody, anybody, to get better from this thing. It's a learning process. Yes.
I think I've seen at least 50% of your videos, if not more.
That's a lot.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Big fan over here. On one of your videos, you said that you stated that as a codependent, one of the traits you see is that the person always gets what they want. As a codependent, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I don't remember the video, so I'm not sure the context. There's a lot of them. Sometimes people email, can you send me this video where you said this? I'm like, was I saying that the family member, the codependent person gets mad because the addicted person always gets what they want?
No, as a codependent, they get what they want.
I said that because I don't think the codependent ever gets what they want. So
Okay.
they're so mad and upset.
Yeah, it was like a one line in the.
Probably what I was meaning is the codependent's upset because they feel like the addicted person runs the show, which is true, but it's really not the addicted person, it's the addiction runs the whole show. The codependent people, they don't ever get what they want. That's why they're so stuck, I think.
I have 5 questions for you.
Great. Well, wait, are we going to hold up the next speaker?
You're fine.
Okay, you sure? Okay.
Yeah.
I understand what boundaries are and they are for me. What can I do if we go out to dinner and he orders a drink and we drove together? How do I set that boundary if we're out in public?
If you're asking the question about how should you react to them ordering, or are you asking more like about the driving, like who drives home part?
I always drive.
Yep, that's good then.
Yeah.
You don't react to that. Any reaction you have to that is going to put you in the bag I roll, and then they're just going to get mad at you, no matter how nice you say it, no matter what a good place in your heart you're coming from. You just act like nothing happened. And then you let them order 5 more, and then you let them make fool themselves, and the next morning, guess what they think? Dang, shouldn't have done that. Whereas if you intervene and you say something, the worst thing that could happen would be they only drink that one drink. Because now I've learned the lesson of, I only had one. I don't know what your dang problem is. You're so upset, like you're just never happy. That's all they're going to learn, so let it roll.
That's all.
Yeah.
Excellent. Watching your videos on manipulation, and I now know I'm being manipulated. What I'm unclear on is what to do about it. He brings up that he was hurt as a child and his mother knew. What is my response when he says these things?
Well, there's sort of like an external response, like when you say that person, and then there's kind of like an internal response just to yourself. But the internal response I have to that is, I do have a lot of empathy for that, and I can understand that. But to me, a reason is not an excuse. And this person, even if they've had horrible, terrible childhood trauma, and maybe that is a big reason why they got addicted, their addiction is very, very likely causing trauma to a bunch of other people. And so in my mind, it's not okay to say, poor pitiful me, I had this bad thing, even though I do feel bad. And I do believe you that the bad thing happens, but that doesn't mean now you can go out and traumatize your kids and everybody else. That's my internal thought. I might not say that externally. I'm just going to think that in my head. Then I might...
What do you say to him, though?
I would just empathetically listen to that.
Okay.
What'd you
and
say?
not really comment on it?
Tell me about that, but I wouldn't let it shift how I was interacting with the substance use, because I'm not going to, I can understand where you're coming from. Most of the people I see, they've been through some bad stuff. addiction gets you when you're down. And I do feel that, but you can't stay stuck in that. It's part of the addictive thinking, the self-pity and resentment, self-pity and resentment.
Yes.
It allows you to keep making bad choices.
You know what, I think maybe we're moving on.
Okay,
That's okay. And I appreciate you asking them because I think everybody learns from them, but maybe there'll be more value if you do a one-on-one review. So, if you guys could please help me in thanking Anne.